I want to dedicate tonight's class to a friend of mine, a classmate of mine, somebody I grew up with. Tragically, we were in a van accident together in camp in the year 1986 with many of our other friends and bunkmates. And my dear friend, Label Khan, was killed in that that van accident in Virginia on the day of Beis Av, the second day of Av. So today is his 34th yahrzeit. We were young boys, a little older than Bar Mitzvah. So I dedicate tonight's class to my childhood friend, Michal Yehuda Aryeh Leib ben Reb Dov Ber Shlita Kahan. Tehei Nishmasai Tzrura B'Tzurer HaChayim, and may his family, his mother and father and siblings and the entire beautiful family only celebrate many, many years of health, happiness, nachas, and prosperity, and may his youthful memory serve as an everlasting source of blessing and inspiration for the family, for all of us, and for the Jewish people. I want to make a special announcement. I had the Sichos and the privilege of recently starting a new class, a daily class of Rambam. The greatest halachic work in Jewish history is the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam, written in the 12th century. And I found that it's one of the better kept secrets of the Jewish world, meaning in all the yeshivas they learn Rambam. You're learning a Gemara and you go look up the Rambam, how the Rambam explains it, how the Rambam phrases it, how the Rambam defines it, with all of the many Svarim and Perushim on the Rambam. But when people learn Rambam according to the order of the Rambam, from the beginning to the end, you get a scope, an all-encompassing, brief and concise scope of all of halacha, every single law of Judaism, even those from the time of the Beis HaMikdash and those that relate to the time of Mashiach. And it's something you can actually retain because it is so systematically organized and structured. The Rambam wrote it in a way that is not only brief and concise, but it's so articulate and definitive that you actually come away each day with a compact chapter and very, very clear perspective of the whole Torah Shebaal Peh, the whole halacha of Torah Shebaal Peh, as he writes in his introduction. So we started this new shir. It's a very exciting and ambitious project, and I want to invite you to join us this Wednesday. Began a new cycle of Rambam, one chapter per day. There are other cycles, but this is the one chapter per day, and we are learning it. You could find the classes on theyeshiva.net. You can find them on dailyrambam.org. You can find them on chabad.org, probably some other websites that I'm not mentioning, but you could find them. We already did the first 6 chapters. I teach it live every single day, and I'm doing it a few days ahead, so we should we shouldn't fall behind in this cycle. Just this Wednesday, they started chapter 1. But I'm doing every day a live class, and everybody's welcome to join. We do it at 10 o'clock in the morning. It streams live on theyeshiva.net, and we have a lovely audience, a chevra, who learn with us and ask a lot of questions afterwards. After the class, we have a special segment for questions and answers. I do want to invite everybody to join us in this class, either live or replay. And today in the cycle was chapter 2, so we already have that online. Right here on the yeshiva.net. There are other websites you could see. The class is Rambam, the Laws of Yesodei HaTorah, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, which will be tomorrow. And we're going to learn tomorrow, chapter 7, 10 o'clock a.m. So I wanted to invite everybody to this special new endeavor, or any class of Rambam that you do would be amazing. Also tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m., I'm going to be giving a class, and the topic is going to be, does Judaism really embrace individuality? We'll be learning something that's connected to Shabbos Chazayin and Tisha B'Av and the 9 days. That's going to be tomorrow, 7:30. And then 10 o'clock, we do the Rambam class, as well as Sunday, 10 o'clock, again, the Rambam class. We do chapter per day. I want to begin tonight's shir with a story. It's a story I just read today. My friend Sruli Besser recently wrote a book called Just Love Them. a wonderful, wonderful book for parents, for educators, for teachers, for mentors, for friends, for Rosh Yeshivas, for people in the world of pedagogy and education. It's a book about the biography of a legendary educator for more than 50 years who recently passed away, Rabbi David Trank of blessed memory. He was, for many, many years, a extraordinary educator and teacher, thank you, in Adelphia, in the yeshiva in Adelphia, New Jersey. And in the book he shares a story that it touched me. There was a rule in Adelphia yeshiva that there's no smoking. No smoking. Absolutely forbidden. One night, Rabbi Trank opens the door in the dormitory of one of the boys, comes into the room, and the boy is in the middle of smoking a cigarette. Breaking the laws, violating the laws of the school. Rabbi Trank looks at him and says, you know, you broke the law. You're not allowed to smoke. The boy is, yeah, I broke the law. And Rabbi Trank said, but you know, I also broke the law. According to Jewish law, you're not allowed to walk into somebody's room without their consent, without their permission. It's a private space. I also broke the law. I broke the law. You broke the law. Let's do this over again the right way. I'm going out of the room. I'm going to knock. You open up the door. This time when I come in, I don't want to catch you smoking. We're doing it all over again. Small story, but it captures the heart and the soul of an educator. He shares there another very cute anecdote, a story actually that happened. He once went out to the park near the yeshiva, and he sees one of the boys again smoking. So he comes over to him. He says, why are you smoking? The boy says, because I'm nervous. I'm always nervous. He says, why are you always nervous? What are you so anxious about? He says, I'm always nervous that one day you're going to catch me smoking. So he started to laugh. He laughed, and the boy laughed. And he allowed the boy to enjoy his humorous response. And he said, okay, but let this be the last time. The opening of Parshas Devarim, which is the last book of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the last sefer of Torah, it seems prosaic. Doesn't seem dramatic at all. Take a look. Open up your source sheets. The first pasuk, right? The first source. You see? Let's read. Eila advarim asher diber Moshe al kol Yisrael be'ever hayardin ba'midbar ba'arava malsuf bein paran uvein teufel v'lofan v'chatzeres v'dizav. A lot of geography here. These are the words that Moshe spoke to all of Israel. Where? On the Transjordan, on the eastern side of the Jordan, okay, in the wilderness, in the desert, in the Arava, in the plain, parallel to the Sea of Reeds, Suf, between a place called Par and a place called Teufel, and a place called Lavan and a place called Chatzeris and a place called Dizahav. That's how I would read it. Seems like, wow, the Torah is giving really lots of zip codes, lots of addresses for a very simple phrase. These are the words that Moshe spoke to the Jewish people on the Transjordan. That's at the surface. The problem, of course, is why so many places? We don't have a precedent for this, not before, not after. It says a lot of times that Moshe spoke to the Jewish people. Sometimes it gives a location. He could have said one. Could have said he was in the desert. Could have said it was in Transjordan. Could have said Ba'arava. What's all these places? 9 locations for the introduction of a speech that Moshe gives. There was a bigger problem. The bigger problem is the names at the end. We have heard of Ever Hayardin. We've heard of Midbar. We've heard of Arava. We've heard of the Yamsuf. We've heard of Paran. We've heard of Chatzeris. We never heard of a place called Teufel. We never heard of a place called Lavan. And we certainly never heard of a place called Dizahav. These three names of places we have absolutely never heard about. What and where are these places? They have never been mentioned before, nor are they mentioned ever again anywhere in the Tanakh, and the names are intriguing. Teufel means to besmirch, slander. Lavan means white. Dizahav means enough gold. Quite fascinating names. Slander, besmirching, speaking bad about something, white, Lavan, and Dizahav, enough gold. So what do we make of this? It's here that the sages, quoted by Rashi, tell us that this pasuk contains much more than what meets the eye. There is actually a very dramatic sub-story that is developing here. What is it? So Rashi comes and tells us all these locations are not geographical locations. Sure, many of them are, but Moshe didn't stand in all of these 9 places simultaneously and give a speech. They are all allegorical. They are all intimations. They're intimating something. Moshe was basically giving a speech about something, and he used these 9 words, these 9 places, as metaphors, as code languages, to illustrate what he was trying to say. Let's see Rashi. It's fascinating few Rashis. In the beginning of Devarim, if you have a Chumash, you can open your Chumash. If you're using our source sheets, go to source number 4. See source number 4, and let's see Rashi. Eila HaDvarim, Zokt Rashi. Lefi shehein divrei toichachos. Eila hadvarim asher diber Moshe are words of rebuke. Umana kan kol hamakayim shechisu lefnei hamakom ben. Moshe is enumerating all the places where the Jewish people rebelled. They provoked Hashem. Lefichach sasem es hadvarim v'izkinem benem b'nei kvodim shel Yisrael. And that's the reason why he concealed the clear, explicit meaning of his words, and he only intimated his message through a remes, through a hinted fashion, because of the respect and the glory of the Jewish people. So Rashi says it's not that he spoke in these 9 places. In fact, some of them we never even heard of these places. Rather, he gave 9 messages. And in order to protect their honor, how did he communicate these messages? He communicated these messages through naming these names, because each name was a place or a message that represented a certain negative act in the narrative of the last 40 years in the wilderness. How do we understand this? So Rashi continues. He literally goes through all these 9 names. Let's see. Take a look at the next page. Bamidbar. Rashi says, they weren't in the desert. They left the desert. They were in the plains of Moav. They were about to go into the land of Israel. They have left the wilderness. They were already in place of an inhabitant of a civilization. They were in the plains of Moav. Why say Bamidbar? This takes us back to a story of Parshas B'Shalach. When they were in the desert, shortly after the exodus of Egypt, they came to Moshe and they complained against God. They said, we wish we would have died in the desert. Why do you have to take us out? Why are we going to have to die from this starvation and thirst? Next, Barava. I like to look up Sukkah. 1 second. This is a pasuk in B'Shalach, Tezayin, Perik Tezayin, pasuk Gimel. They left Elim, they came to Midbar Sin, between Elim and Sinai. This is the Tesvav Iyar, and they all attacked Moshe and Aaron. And the Jews said, "Why Miyitin Musenu b'yad Hashem be'eretz Mitzrayim? Why didn't God kill us in Egypt when we were sitting on the pot of meat and we had bread to satiate us? Why did you take us out to this desert to kill all of us through starvation in the desert? We should have died. Miyitin Musenu be'eretz Mitzrayim. Miyitin Musenu b'yad Hashem be'eretz Mitzrayim." So Rashi says this was the first issue. Bamidbar. What happened in the Midbar? Next, Ba'arava. What's Ba'arava? B'shvil ha'arava shechatu b'al po'er b'shittim ba'arvis moyav. He rebuked them because of what happened in the Arava. They sinned by worshipping the Baal Pa'or in a place called Shittim in the plains of Moav, as discussed at the end of Parshas Balak. This is what he chastised them about. Next, Mol Suf. He wasn't near the Yam Suf then. He spoke about the Red Sea. Al Mashem Rubi Yam Suf, Boyam Le Yam Suf, Shamnam and Bli Enkfanam and Mitzrayim. When they stood at the Yam Suf, they came there, they criticized Hashem and Moshe. They said, are not enough graves in Egypt that you had to bring us here to die here? And then after, when they were supposed to leave from the Yam Suf to go to the next journey again, there was another rebellion against Hashem b'Yam Suf. As Rashi explains, that they didn't even want to leave. Moshe had to force the Jewish people because they were busy collecting all the spoil and all the booty from the Egyptians who drowned. They didn't want to leave. Moshe literally had to force them to get out. They did not want to obey and move on with the journey. They wanted to remain there. Or there's other explanations what their rebellion over there was, as the Gemara says in Erkin Daf Tesvav. Next, Bein Paran uvein Teufel v'Lavan. We already did Bamidbar, we already did Barava, we already did Mel Suf. What's the next? The next is Bein Paran uvein Teufel uveLavan. We went through the whole Tanakh. We did not find a place that's called Teufel and Lava. We went through the whole Chumash, no place. This was a metaphor. This was an intimation, a remes. The Jewish people slandered the Mun. The Mun was white. Teufel and Lavan are not places of cities. They sound like places of cities, but they were really messages, hinted messages. Teufel and Lavan is Taflu alaman shuhu Lavan. They slandered, they besmirched, they spoke so negatively about the man, which was white. That's Teufel and Lavan. And Paran, he says Paran, in the desert of Paran, they sinned through the spies. The spies came back and they all began weeping and sobbing and saying they don't want to go into the land of Israel. They lost their faith in Parshas Shlach. Next, Chatzeris, Machlekasir Shel Kairach. The war of Kairach happens after they leave Chatzeris. This is the war of Kairach, the mutiny of Kairach against Moshe and Aaron that so many Jews join with. This is what Moshe was talking about, Chatzeris. Or another explanation in Rashi is what happened to Miriam in Chatzeris because she slandered Moshe Rabbeinu, and yet they didn't learn from it. They didn't learn from Miriam, and they spoke slanderously about Hashem and about Eretz Yisrael. Last one. What's the last one? V'di Zahav. There's no place called Di Zahav. So Rashi says, Haychichan ala egel sha'asu b'shvil roiv zav shahayalehem. Moshe chastised them for the calf which they made because they had so much gold. Di Zahav is like Dai Zahav, enough gold. They had so much gold to the point that they said, we have enough gold. They had too much gold. Because they had so much gold, they didn't have what to do with it. What they do? They sculptured an amazing golden calf from the gold. Shenemar, v'kesef ribeisi lavazav asolabal. Prophet Isaiah, hundreds and hundreds of years later, speaks about this. He says, in the name of Hashem, I have given the Jewish people so much silver, and they took the zav, they took the gold, and they used it to make an idol. They used it to make a Baal. So Moshe Rabbeinu, the Di Zav, is not in a place. He's chastising them about the egel that they made because they had abundant gold. That's the last words, V'di Zahav. Here, when we focus and meditate on the words of Rashi, something extraordinary and enigmatic and very perplexing emerges. Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to chastise the Jewish people, as Rashi says. Every one of these 9 places is another intimation of something they did in that place or something that's associated with that name in order to explain why the Torah says he spoke in all these places. Not that he spoke in these places, he spoke about things that are connected to these names, as Rashi says. And Rashi goes through quite a bunch of sins, errors, transgressions, rebellions, mutinies, which demonstrated a lack of faith, a lack of trust, a lack of loyalty, a lack of integrity, a lack of dedication, a sense of rebelliousness throughout the journey of the desert. The last one, though, catches us off guard. And in order to appreciate this, I want to learn with you another Rashi. This Rashi comes much earlier in Chumash. And for this, I'm going to ask you to go to source number 2. Source number 2 in your source sheet, Parshas Kisisa, Perik Lamed Beis, Pasuk Lamed Aleph. Let's remember context. The Jewish Moshe Rabbeinu goes up on the mountain. He's there for 40 days and 40 nights. He receives the 2 luchos. The Jewish people, in the meantime, take all the gold that they have, and they famously sculpture the golden calf. It becomes an orgy of promiscuity, of adultery, of idolatry, of murder, as Rashi says. Hashem is so upset and hurt 40 days after the marriage, such betrayal. He tells Moshe Rabbeinu, let's call this quit. We're going to start all over again with you. I'm going to wipe them out and I'll build a Jewish nation through you. Moshe Rabbeinu pleads, begs, asks for forgiveness. Moshe Rabbeinu comes down. He famously breaks the luchos. The next day, he tells the Jewish people, you have sinned tremendously. I'm going to go back to God and try to atone. Pasuk Lamed Aleph. Vayoshav Moshe Ladinoi Vayoymar. Ona chato amazeh chato gdoile vayasulem eleizov. Moshe turns to Hashem and says, please, this nation has done a great sin, an excessive sin, a tremendous sin. They have made for themselves a god of gold. And then he continues, now, if you will forgive them, awesome. And if not, blot me out, erase me from the book that you have written. That's what Moshe says. So he goes up to Hashem, listen to his words. He says, they have done a tremendous sin. They made a god of gold. If you forgive them, good. And if not, I'm not part of this. You erase me also from the Sefer that you wrote. I'm also not part of it. And of course, Hashem forgives the Jewish people. On this pasuk, there is an extraordinary Rashi. I'm going to ask you to take a look in this Rashi. Again, it's source number 2, Likkutei Zahav. You see? Likkutei Zahav. Says Rashi, Atu shagaramta lehem. Wow. You were the one who caused this whole problem. He's telling this to Hashem. Sheishpata lehem zav. You gave them all this gold. V'chol cheftzim. Everything they wanted, you gave them. Ma yasu shelo yechtu. What do you want from them? What are they supposed to do? Not to sin. They have so much gold, it's impossible that they shouldn't sin. Mashal Melech, he gives a metaphor. There was a king, Shayamachel Mashkes Bnai Umekashte. V'Tayla like Hizbet Savaru. Mamida bePesach Beizaynes. Mayasa ben Shloyecht. He was a king. He gave his son to eat, supplied him with drinks, decorated him with all jewelry, places a wallet of all jewels and pearls and money on his neck, as a necklace, and then places him at the door of a home of bezaynis, of prostitution, of promiscuity, a house of ill repute. What do you expect from this child? Not to sin? The kid is spoiled. He has everything. He can do whatever he wants with the money. What do you want from him? And you put him in this place. Of course he's going to sin. Where did Rashi come up with this idea? The truth is Rashi was reading the pasuk. Let me shut this. Rashi was reading the pasuk very clearly. Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to achieve the forgiveness of the Jewish people. Yeah. He comes up to Hashem and he says, I know that they did a gewaldige sin. But I want you should forgive them. And if not, erase me from the book. And when he says this, he says, and they made a god of gold. Why is he saying that? Hashem knows what they did. You're trying to ask forgiveness. So why are you now dramatizing how bad their act was? You have to say the other way. They sinned, but you could forgive them. Moshe builds up the sin. They have sinned tremendously and they made a god of gold. They took lifeless metal and they turned it into God. That undermines what you're trying to accomplish. You want Hashem to forgive them. So Rashi says, no, Moshe is actually diminishing the sin. When Moshe says they made a god of gold, you know what he's really telling the Rebbeinu Shalom? He's basically saying, the Jewish people did a great sin, but I want you to know, the sin was great, but the cause of the sin is not really them. The cause of the sin is you, God. You know why? It's a god of gold. Who gave them all this gold? Who told them back in Egypt that before they leave Egypt, they have to empty out Mitzrayim of the vessels of silver and gold? And who made sure Hashem Nosa Nechenom Bein Mitzrayim? Parshas boy. Hashem gave grace to the Jews in the eyes of the Egyptians that they should lend everything, silver and gold and garments. This was God's commandment. He wanted the Jewish people should go out for Rechush Gadol with excessive gold. And at the sea, who split the sea and made sure all the Egyptians drowned, and all the gold that they had there was left for the Jewish people to take? And Hashem wanted they should take Bizas Hayam, as Rashi said earlier, the spoil at the sea. You did it. You give them so much. You know what it does to people? It makes people crazy. It makes people crazy. It triggers tremendous temptation. There's absolutely no humility, very little discipline. And you put them in a home of promiscuity, very difficult situations. What do you want? Forgive them. They sinned badly. But the cause of the sin? Wow. Rashi got this from Brachas Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. The Gemara says there that Moshe hitiach dvarim klapi ma'ila. Moshe flung words to heaven, which means he was very sharp with Hashem. And this is one of the examples. The Gemara there has an extraordinary expression. A lion does not roar after eating a box of straw. A lion roars after eating a box of flesh, a box of meat. Rashi says, what's noyim? Sameach umishtageya umazik. After a lion eats straw, he's not very happy. But after a lion eats meat, a lot of meat, kuper shel basar, there is a euphoria in the lion's life. Sameach, celebedik, mishtageh, he goes crazy, a mazik. That's what happens here. You gave the lion not straw, you gave them abundant gold. And you know what? They misused it, they went crazy. This is a reason to forgive the Jewish people. The Gemara says there that the Jews got so much gold. You know what they said? They said two words, Dai Zav. It's enough. We had enough gold. We had enough gold. That's what they said. Too much. So Moshe uses that as an excuse, as a reason to explain to Hashem why he has to forgive them. You're the one who's ultimately responsible. They took a sin. They did a great sin. But the cause of it was you. In the words of Rashi, Atuhu shagaram taleh. You're the one who is responsible for all of this. What a Gemara, what a Rashi. Now I want you to see something very interesting. This Rashi is repeated again in Parshas Devarim, right? Let's go back to the Rashi in Parshas Devarim. Take a look. Your first source. V'dizav. Moshe chastised them for the calf that they created because of the abundance of gold that he gave them. Dai zav. They had too much gold. There was enough gold. And Hashem gave them extra gold, and therefore they made the egel, and that's what he chastised them about. And here he brings a pasuk from Moshe, which in Parshas Kisisi he doesn't bring this pasuk. And it's very strange. Why does he not bring the pasuk there? If Rashi feels that you have to bring a proof from a pasuk, that it's the gold that caused the Jewish people to sin, like he brings here, v'zav asul lebal, why doesn't he bring it over there? And if he doesn't feel you have to bring it there the first time around, why does he bring it the second time around? The truth is, because the context of these two parshas are diametrically opposed. In Parshas Kisisa, he's chastising God. In Parshas Devarim, he's chastising the Jewish people. In Parshas Kisisa, he's trying to get Hashem to forgive them. So he's trying to minimize this sin. So he tells Hashem, you did it. Elikei Zav, it's your gold. He doesn't want to bring the pasuk v'zav asu labal, which basically means they took a gift of God and they used it to betray Hashem. I give you $1 million, and instead of being grateful to me, you used those very $1 million in order to destroy me. If you wouldn't have had the $1 million, you couldn't have done anything. Because I gave you a gift, you used that gift against me. That dramatizes the sin. In Parshas Kisisa, Moshe is trying to minimize the sin. So Moshe just says that all happened because of the gold that you have given them. But in Parshas Devarim, he's actually not chastising God, he's chastising the Jewish people. So he chastises the Jewish people, he tells them, V'dizov, this is because of the gold that you got. Hashem gave you gold. He gave you so much gold, and now you took this gold and you use it against him. This is part of the Teichach. That's why he brings here the pasuk v'zav asal labal. He doesn't bring in the Parshas Kisisa because it would be inconsistent with the theme, according to Rashi, the straightforward learning of Chumash would be inconsistent with the theme over there. If that's the case, all seems so nice, but now we have the real problem. According to this Rashi becomes so perplexing. Moshe is trying to chastise the Jewish people here in Devarim, but really he's chastising Hashem. Because who gave them all this gold? It's true, he's telling them, you made the calf, and you made the calf with the gold that Hashem gave you, but look at Rashi's words. He chastised them because of the calf that they made only for one reason, because of the abundance of gold that they had. Who gave them this abundance of gold? The creator of the world. Again, he is the one who compelled them in Egypt to make sure that they leave with a lot of gold, and he's the one who made sure that at the sea they amassed enormous quantities of gold. So essentially, when Moshe is chastising the Jewish people, he's blaming somebody else. He's blaming the Ribbono Shel Olam. The same Rashi that's brought over there to blame Moshe Kavayachal Hitiach Dvarim is telling Hashem you're guilty, he brings here in the words that are supposed to be chastising. The other 8 places makes a lot of sense. Bamidbar, they complained, we want to die in the desert. That was not nice. Ba'arava, they were promiscuous with the daughters of Moav. Not nice. Paran is despised. Toifa Lavan, they slandered the man. I get that. Mol Suv, they rebelled by the Yamsuf. Chatzeres, Kairach's rebellion. Dizahav, suddenly what's Dizahav? Dizahav is too much gold. Hashem gave them too much gold, and that's why they did the calf. In other words, you're minimizing the sin. And Rashi could have even said, Haychichan al ha'egel sha'asu biroiv hazahav. He chastised them for the calf that they made with the gold that they had, with the abundance gold. And the teichecha is, Hashem gives you a gift and you use it against him. He could have said that, but Rashi actually emphasizes the word bishvil. They did it because, almost like it's because they had so much gold, and that's what a lot of gold does to people. Rashi, is Moshe chastising them? Or is Moshe actually telling Hashem that you're guilty? It's in this last Rashi on Di Zahav that the pattern emerges. Shabbos Parshas Devarim Tovshin Lamed Aleph was Tisha B'Av, the 9th of 1971, Shabbos Devarim. The Lubavitcher Rebbe then conducted his Shabbos Farbrengen, and as usual, every Shabbos he would give a long shir in a Rashi on the Parsha, and other sugyas in Shas and Poskim, and Halacha, and Machshava, and Hashkafa, Kabbalah, Chassidus, contemporary events, Hashkafic questions, etc. But that Shabbos, which was also Tisha B'Av Nidche, he spoke about this Rashi, about the Teichecha. And I'm going to convey one point of a very elaborate talk, but I'm going to convey one major theme that the Lubavitcher Rebbe developed then, and try to explain it the way I understood it in my own words. Let's understand a more basic question. Let's get into a more basic question. This whole thing seems strange. Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to respect the Jewish people, and therefore he's not mentioning clearly what they did. He's mentioning 9 places that intimate sins. Why can't he just be open with them? In Hebrew there's an expression, Tedaber Dugri. Speak to the point, tell me what you want to say. It's not like Moshe Rabbeinu never rebuked the Jewish people. You look through Chumash, Moshe rebuked the Jewish people. He knew how to be tough with his people. It wasn't an easy 40-year journey through the wilderness. It was quite complex and quite challenging. But suddenly here Rashi tells us it's all beremes. Everything is beremes. Why? What's what's the idea here? In fact, if I were to ask you, I could communicate to somebody, and I want to talk about some serious mistakes they made. You think I should be open about it, or I should cover it up? Today's generation, it's a mitzvah to be open. That's what the therapist will tell you, no? But everything is hidden here. We need Rashi to uncode it, to unravel the codes. What's the meaning of this? Speak to them openly. The truth is, that this actually conveys a life-changing message in life. It's the story that happened then, and it's a story that still happens. And it's a story that each of us have to meditate upon and apply to our lives. One of the hardest things in life is to hear rebuke. To hear real rebuke. I don't mean rebuke, some small mistake I made. I'm talking about real rebuke, maybe about some serious decisions in my life, serious errors, transgressions, mistakes I've made, people I've hurt. It's one of the most difficult things. Those of you who are in the position of communication, education, therapy work know every defense mechanism I will bring up in order to protect myself. Not even consciously. Consciously, I may say I want to hear it, but subconsciously, I will sabotage every form of rebuke that somebody communicates to me. Sometimes people come for a conversation, and I'll ask somebody, do you want to hear the truth, or do you want me to tell you what you would like to hear? And of course, everybody says, oh, of course I want to hear the truth. But then when you tell them the truth, they may not be able to hear it. There's a therapist here in Muncie. He's very, very successful, extremely successful. And I asked him once, what's the source of, what's your mechanism? What's your trick? And he told me a few things, but one of them left a very deep impression on me. He says, a guy comes in here, or a woman comes in here. He says, often they come in the first time and they tell me the issue. And I hear it. And in my mind, it's delusional, it's absurd, it's foolish. Sometimes it's coming from such narcissism or trauma or dreams that are completely not rooted in reality and a skewed, distorted sense of reality. And I want to scream at them, you're dreaming. You're not living in this world. You have concocted an alternative fictional story that never existed and never will exist. But if I say it to them, they'll never come back again. So he says, for 9 months, I listen, I empathize, I identify, I hear them, I ask questions, and I'm genuinely interested in understanding their perspective. And then after 9 months, I could start sharing with them the truth. There's not a therapist who wants the people to stay there to get their money. He likes to send people out after a session. He likes to send them out. But it was a very profound understanding of human nature. One of the hardest things in the world is to be able to hear and internalize rebuke, and not hear it in order to be able to counterattack, or hear it in order to be able to prove the person wrong, or hear it in order that you should say that I'm a gentleman and I know how to listen to critique and I'm fine. I don't want my wife to tell me that I'm an egotistical maniac or an insecure petty loser, so therefore I have to listen. I'm talking about really listening. Listening to the point that it can penetrate and help me redefine the trajectory of my life. That's not easy. And I want to tell you something. Sometimes it's not that I don't want to. I may want to. I can't. This is where trauma comes in. People who have been traumatized. And trauma does not mean that something dramatic happened in your life. That, of course. You were molested, you were abused, you grew up in the most dysfunctional family with beatings physically or emotionally, you were shamed, you were humiliated. Sometimes, if you're a sensitive soul, trauma can be very, very subtle. It's not about what happened to you. It's what happens inside of you. Trauma is basically my sense of self becomes distorted, and I cannot make choices from my authentic, expansive, true, infinite self. All my choices are coming from a very restricted, narrow, abducted, and exiled sense of self. It's pathetic, and more importantly, it's tragic, because the person who's traumatized doesn't know that he or she is completely not in touch with their authentic self. And all my decisions, including what I'm hearing from you, has nothing to do with what you're saying or what I'm capable of hearing. It's being processed and filtered exclusively through the lenses of my trauma. And therefore what I'm hearing is basically, you hate me, you think I'm a loser. Here I have another enemy in my life. My own spouse, or my own father, my own mother, my own brother, my own sister, my rabbi, my therapist, my best friend, is another enemy. There's nobody I can trust. It's the confirmation bias. My trauma just reaffirms what I always knew. I knew that I'm lonely in this world. Everyone is out to kill me and get me, if not today, tomorrow. And those who are smiling are even worse enemies, because they make believe they're my friends. And I can't even hear anything else. You start rebuking me. My sense of self is so shattered, it's so traumatized, it's so broken, it's so fragmented. By the time your words get into me, I'm already in China, in Wuhan or somewhere else. I'm already out. I have already checked out emotionally. Now, I'm a smart guy. I'm civil, I'm respectful. I'll sit there, I'll smile, I'll listen, maybe I'll even take notes. But inside, I have immediately dismissed you. You know why? I can't hear you because there's no I. My eye has been so broken. Where do we begin to heal? This is not an easy issue. Those of you who have some experience with this know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Tovei Alecha Bracha. It's only when I could be absolutely convinced that you don't hate me, that you really, really love me, that you cherish me. And then step 2 is, I can look at my trauma and observe it from a distance and realize I am not my trauma. And I can watch what your words are doing to my trauma. It's almost like I watch my brain responding to your message from a place of trauma, and then I can choose to respond from a different place. I can tell the trauma, I get you. You're trying to protect me, but there's really a more expansive way of seeing this. But the first thing I have to know is that you are not my enemy. You actually like me. You are here for me. This is the prerequisite for teichicha. If I am to rebuke anybody or anything, whether the person has trauma or even not, a few prerequisites that are necessary. The first thing is, you have to feel that I love you, I cherish you, I respect you, I believe in you. The reason I'm chastising you, the reason I'm giving you teichicha is because I want to be close to you, because I believe in your potential, because I yearn for you, because I see the opportunities that are embedded in your amazing, brilliant, powerful soul. When I'm chastising you, I don't think you're evil. I don't think you're the ultimate loser, shmata, victim, sinner, transgressor. On the contrary, I see your glory, I see your greatness, and that's why I'm perturbed by the lost opportunities when I identify the potentials, the glorious potentials that exist in you. I actually respect you, and that's why I want you to live up to your greatest potentials. Ich vergin dir. I'm not jealous of you. I love you. I want your success. Your success is my success, and therefore, I will fight for you. I will take risks for you, and I will defend you. Because for me, my rebuke to you is actually a symptom, it's a product, it's a derivative of my love. That's why Moshe, when he chastises the Jewish people, Rashi says he does it with intimations, for their respect. What's this respect about? Because your respect, your glory, your honor is more important than the words of the rebuke. The rebuke must come from your honor, from your glory. The baseline has to be that there is kavod for you. I actually respect you. And before I chastise you, I have to ask myself those tough questions. And that's why, even when you did something bad, I'm going to try and find the good and the positive. It's not like, oh, here he goes again, this evil, bad monster. No way. I'm actually going to see and identify the goodness even within the mistakes. I'm going to try to find what we call the limud sichos, the positive side. My brother shared with me something he heard from the former British Chief Rabbi, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. He said, What's the difference between a rabbi and a rebbe? So the rabbi gets up, gives a 20-minute sermon, pre-corona. Starts off with a joke. Tells 3 or 4 stories, makes the people laugh, cries. His voice fluctuates, goes up and goes down. He takes off his glasses 5-10 times, walks around, waves his hands. Sometimes he gives a scream, looks at every single person, and finally at the end he reaches the punchline. He starts giving musar. He starts rebuking the audience. And everybody, as he begins his musar, turns to his friend and says, "Who does he think he is? He's blaming us. He should blame himself." Then he says, "What's a rebbe?" He says, "A rebbe, he gives a talk. It may be monotone, doesn't take off his glasses even once, doesn't tell one story, doesn't tell one joke, not 300 people sitting, but maybe 6,000 people sitting. And then at some point, he starts speaking from his heart words of musar. So then every one of the 5,000 people sitting there says, he's talking about me. How do I repair my life?" That makes all the difference. One of the best stories I have heard in my life, I heard at a wedding of my cousin, my first cousin. He's the Chabad ambassador to Emory University. Rabbi Shneur Zalman and Miriam Lipsker, Nee Greenberg, got married at the Yeshiva of Morristown, Rabbinical College of America. And I went to the wedding. At the Kabbalas Panim, at the reception, I was sitting near the Masada Kedushin, the one who would officiate at the wedding. His name was Rabbi Shalom Ber Gordon, Zechreinu Livracha, the rabbi for many, many years in Newark, New Jersey. He was actually ill. I saw at the time that he was ill. He had cancer, and I think he passed away around a year later. At the reception, we're talking. I asked him, "How long have you been in the rabbinate in New Jersey?" He told me, I think since 1949. So it was then 50 years in the rabbinate. I said, "Wow, teach me something. Tell me what you learned." And he said, "There was one message I learned early on, and it was the most important, life-changing message that I had to hear. It sustained me every day since." I was very eager, and this is what Reb Shalom Ber Gordon, Zechreinu Livracha, taught me. He said, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, I was a young man, and I was hired to be a rabbi in New Jersey. It was an Orthodox shul, but this is Orthodoxy from the 1940s. Judaism was very, very weak in the United States. I get up the first Shabbos, second Shabbos, third Shabbos, and I'm telling the Balabatim that they have to change their ways. You shouldn't be driving on Shabbos. You have to keep Shabbos. You have to put on tefillin every day. You have to daven 3 times a day. You have to eat kosher not only in your house, also when you leave the house. You have to send your kids to Jewish schools. The real issues that were confronting American Jews then, and still confronting American Jews now. And he said, the president came over to me and said, "This is not going to work. If you continue this way, you're going to be sent out very fast. You have to compliment the people and tell them that they're good Jews. You don't give them mussar. Come on." He says, "I drive on Shabbos. This one drives on Shabbos. This one doesn't eat kosher. This, come on. You don't do this." Reb Shalom Ber said, "I was completely confused. I thought the job of a rabbi is to inspire people to become better." So he went to his Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, Zeichet Tzadik Livracha, passed away in 1950, Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud. He was already then, the Rebbe was very, very ill, extremely ill physically. And Rabbi Gordon told me, he says, I went into the Rebbe and I conveyed my dilemma. What do I do? Oili mi yitzri, oili mi yitzri. If I say the truth, they throw me out. If I don't say the truth, if I flatter them, then I'm betraying God. I'm betraying my role, my mission, my position. Was tut me? And he said, the Rebbe looked at me. The Rebbe had piercing, the Rebbe Rayatz, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe had incredibly piercing eyes. You could see in the pictures. He looks at me and he says, "Bist du mal gewesen in Auschwitz? Have you ever been to a sauna?" He says, this shocked me. The Rebbe is now going to ask me about Auschwitz. In America then, a sauna, Auschwitz for Jews was very holy. Everybody went to the Schwitz. You would sit there, you would discuss Harry Truman, Roosevelt, Eisenhower. This was the culture then. Jews went to the Schwitz. They played bingo and they went to the Schwitz and they ate nuts over there. Some people still do it. So he tells the Rebbe, yeah, I went to the sun, I went to the Schwitz. He says, describe to me what happens. So he describes to the Rebbe what happens in the Schwitz. People go in, it's boiling hot. There's coal on fire. The fire rises, there's benches. People sit on one bench and they love it, and then they go higher and higher and higher. And on the top, they mamish are kvelling from the enjoyment of the Schwitz. The Rebbe says, what happens afterwards? So da shamish abeder mit abuzim, is there like the gabbai of the Schwitz with a broom? He says, yeah, what happens? So Shalom Ber says what used to happen in the Schwitzes, then it actually still happens here in Muncie and some other places. You ask the guy in charge to give you malchus, to give you lashes with the special Schwitz broom. And it's very, very geschmack on your red body that is now on fire from the Schwitz. He smacks your back with the bosom. And the Rebbe says, and what do people say? They say, mer, mer, mer. They say, give me more, give me more. So the Rebbe says, I'm going to ask a question. If this guy comes over to your middle of the street with a broom and starts knocking you over your head or over your back, what do? He says, either you run away or you beat him up or you call the police. So he said, so why in the Schwitz do you ask him to do it more? So Rabbi Gordon told me at this point I understood I would be wise if I would be silent. And the Rebbe said, because if you come over to somebody with a broom in the middle of the street and you start whacking him, he's going to run away from you. He will not want to be with you, or he'll counterattack. In a Schwitz, you don't just attack him with a broom. I have to say this in Yiddish. It says, the erste Sache is, mevarem dem Mann, und me hebt dem auf. Und danach, wenn man nimmt heraus de Besem, und me hebt und schlagen, sagt mehr, mehr, mehr. The first thing is you warm him up. The second thing is you elevate him, because they go from bench to bench to bench, because the heat rises. Afterwards, when you take out the broom and you start smiting him, he says, more, more, more. I'm loving it. More, more. The Rebbe said, if you get up in shul, you start chastising people, they'll throw you out. Mit der verwandeln der Shul in a Schwitz. You have to transform your shul into a Schwitz, into a spiritual, godly sauna. Man darf sie anwarmen und aufheben. You have to warm people up and you have to lift them up. Turn your shul into a place of fire, of passion, a place where there's godly fire that is ablaze. You warm them up and you lift them up. And then when you take out the broom, then when you start communicating authentic words to challenge people's lives, you know what they're going to tell you? More, more, more. Words of a Rebbe to a young American chassid and rabbi. He looked at me, I'll never forget this, and he said, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, you think anybody needs any other advice in their life as a rabbi after they get this advice? He said, I didn't need any other advice afterwards. If you don't create a Schwitz, you can't give teichicha. People want to change. Who doesn't want to be better? Who doesn't want to live a full life? Who doesn't want to maximize their potential? But I'm afraid. I'm afraid of my own shadow, and most importantly, I'm too broken to feel that I have another person who hates me, another person who doesn't believe in me, and I just shut down. But if you bring me into your Schwitz, if I could feel your authenticity and your love and your respect, I can go out of my trauma and see it as trauma and stop blaming you and start going internal, inside, and really lift myself up. I mentioned before Rabbi David Schrank. So he tells in the books, really best, it tells the book a story that he was in camp and he was learning Masechta Kiddushin with his students. They were learning, I think it's Daf Chafei, the area, the zip code Daf Chafei, about how you acquire animals, like elephant. How do you acquire these animals? The Gemara speaks there about the method called Hagboha. lifting up the animal, or Meshicha. Hagbah is lifting up the item or lifting up the animal, and in halacha, that's an acquisition. It becomes yours. So he turns to his students and he says, listen to what the Gemara is teaching us. You want somebody to become yours? You want a living being to become yours? You have to lift them up. Hagbah. The moment you lift somebody up, koine, they are yours for life. When I am in the presence of somebody who lifted me up, who changed my life, who made me believe in myself even when I didn't, made me believe in me even when I couldn't see it, who allowed me to redefine my destiny and my trajectory, I want to belong to this person. And I am happy to hear the rebuke of this person. I'm going to say, mer, un mer, un mer, un mer. That's what Rashi is telling us here. Moshe couldn't just get up and said, you guys made a golden calf. V'di zahav, v'dai zahav. In the words of Teichecha, Moshe is not only hiding the rebuke and making sure it's eclipsed by the sense of glory and covet, but even the words of Teichecha, you know what he's doing? He's saying, and I know that there are others to blame. And I know that you were not the ones who decided that you should have so much gold. I know that this was a great test and challenge that Ribono Shel Olam gave you. I understand where you guys are coming from. I empathize with you. When people hear this, you like me, you love me, you honor me, you understand me, you empathize with me, you're not here to blame me and put me down and denigrate me, everything changes. The Medrash Rabbi says in the beginning of Sefer Devarim, Hashem told Moshe to say these words of rebuke. He said, you know why? If Bilam would have done it, they would have said, oh, he hates us. Of course he's going to rebuke us. So he says, better, Yoichichon Moshe Sha'oyavon. Moshe loves them, let him rebuke them, and Bilam, who hates them, let him bless them. They got to reverse the roles. You would think Moshe should bless them and Bilam should rebuke them. No, if Bilam rebukes them, they won't be able to hear it. They'll say, Bilam hates me, you hate me, hate me, hate me. Of course you think I'm bad. I can't hear what you're saying. Moshe loves me, I can hear what he's saying. Let Bilam bless them and let Moshe chastise them and rebuke them. This is a vital lesson in life. If you seek to change someone, make sure you are willing to help them when they need your help. You are willing to defend them when they need your defense. Make sure you see the good in them, not just the bad. Unbelievable story I want to share with you. Gewaltige Meise. Reb Mottel Chernobyler. Reb Mottel Chernobyler, the holy Chernobyler Magid, Reb Mordechai of Chernobyl, Twersky, many of the Twerskis come from him, was the son of the holy Reb Nachum of Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a great student of the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid. Passed away, I think, when? Yud Aleph Cheshvan, Tovkuf, Non Ches probably, which would be 1796, somewhere in that area, if I'm not mistaken. The holy Reb Nachum Chernobyl, after he passed away, from time to time, he would appear in a vision to his great son, the Chernobyl Magid. And this was very comforting for his son. Once, there was a long time that Reb Mottel did not see his father, Reb Nachum, and he was so upset, he was so hurt. Sometime later, he fell ill, and he was in a comatose state. They didn't think he would wake up, he would survive. He survived. And he made a Suda Seidah, he made a feast to celebrate his healing. And they say a Maisa that during that feast he shared a story. And he said, during my illness, I wasn't conscious. And my soul went up and I met my father, Reb Nachum, and I said, Tate, where were you? Father, where were you? And Reb Nachum said, I don't know, but my soul could not meet up with yours. He says, why not? He says, probably you did something pretty bad recently. And just my neshama couldn't get close. It was like there was too much toxicity. You know, souls don't go everywhere. They need to have, they go to places of purity. He says, Father, what have I done? He says, ask yourself recently, has there come a Jew to you for help? And maybe you rejected him, you threw him out, you insulted him. He says, Chas v'sholom, Father. Me? I would never do that. He says, think. Tell me, was there a Jew who came to you recently for help and you did not help him? He said, well, recently there was a Jew who came for help. He was having a lot of challenges in his life. He said, and what did you tell him? He said, I tried to comfort him. He said, how did you try to comfort him? He said, I told him the pasuk in Mishlei, Proverbs chapter 3. God chastises he who he loves. Hashem rebukes the one he loves. The one he loves, he rebukes. He cares about the person. He challenges the person. He stimulates the person. I told him, you're having all these challenges, all this pain and agony in life. It must be Hashem loves you. Reb Nachum Shenabela says, that was it. Let me tell you how they teach the pasuk in Gan Eden. Let me tell you how they teach the pasuk in Gan Eden. Ki es asher yehav kama Hashem yochiach. When you really love another Jew, you rebuke Hashem. When you really love another Jew, you give musar kevayachal to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Why are you doing this to this Jew? Ki es asher yehav Hashem yochiach. That's how we teach it here in Gan Eden. When Moshe gives teichecha to the Jewish people, he's talking about their sins, and he's talking about serious stuff. And then he comes to the crescendo, the worst sin, Chet HaEgel, and what does he say? V'dizov. He starts blaming God. It's like I chastise you, and by the way, it's not your fault. Moshe wanted to rebuke them. Moshe wanted they shouldn't repeat the mistake, but his point was not to rebuke his people. His point was to glorify his people, to elevate his people, to bring his people into Auschwitz, to transform them, to make sure this doesn't happen again in their life. And therefore, the most important first prerequisite is empathy. I know what happened. I know the reasons. I know the causes. And from there, I also know your mistakes. When I can hear that I made terrible mistakes, but I can put it in context, in the right context. I'm not this evil, malicious loser. I'm not this horrific, horrible, monstrous person. Hopefully not. When I can make you feel I understand where you're coming from. I don't think you're a bad people, Moshe says. I know that Hashem tested you. He gave you all this crazy amount of gold, and the lion roars from a box of meat, not from a box of straw. You did not get straw, you got meat. You're the child who was decorated and given all this jewelry and foods and drinks and place, but Pesach Beis Zaynis, I understand. But I want you to know that you still have choices, and you made the wrong choice, and you could make different choices. You're powerful enough to make different choices. That's the teichecha that lasts forever. You know how I know? Because we're still learning it, and we're still loving it, and we're still cherishing it, and we're still analyzing it. 3,300 years later, this is the teichecha that lasts forever. If this is the case, comes the Lubavitcher Rebbe and says, read the story again, and now go backwards. When you see what Rashi did in Dizov, as he's chastising the Jews, he's also empathizing with them, because he knows that's the way you reach and change people's lives. Now retroactively go back, and you'll see that in the other 8 places, he did exactly the same thing. As he is rebuking, as he is speaking harsh words about harsh realities, about harsh mistakes, in each one, he is also finding something positive. He is finding a point of light. He is demonstrating and displaying profound empathy, attentiveness, sensitivity, understanding to circumstances. Not because he doesn't want to chastise them, because he wants to chastise them. Because he wants the message to go into the depth of their hearts. Because he wants they should know how much he understands them and loves them and will fight for them and take risks for them and stand up to them, even to the creator of the world. Go back and you'll see the same pattern in each one. And here I'm going to do it very briefly with you. Each one. We're going to go through all of them till V'di Zahav, and we'll now be able to see the same pattern. In the Teichecha, there is also profound empathy. Not rationalizations and justifications and saying, not so bad. No. Moshe is not a moral relativist. Moshe is calling a spade. But it's very different when I understand the trauma that you have been through, when I appreciate the challenges that you're facing, and when I truly love you, cherish you, respect you, and then I chastise you. It's because I understand your power, not your weakness. So I help you understand your power and make different decisions in your life. This is a life-changing lesson in my eyes. Let's go through them. Start off Bamidbar. Bamidbar. I'm not going to read this whole piece in the Sicha inside, but if you want to look in the Sicha inside, this is going to be page 4 and on. Page 4 and on. Take the first one. We're going to go through all of them. So take a look at please take a look again at source 4, source number 4, okay? Because that's where Rashi goes through all of the 9 places. And let's see. Okay, the first thing is Bamidbar. What does Rashi say about Bamidbar? One second, I lost one of my pages. Give me a second. Atazai. Take a look at Bamidbar. What does Rashi say about Midbar? I'm going to go through all of them. Loy b'midbar hayol bar v'smoy v'mal b'midbar b'shul ma shechisu b'midbar shamru mi yitein musena b'yad Hashem b'Mitzrayim. Here, there's a very obvious question. I don't understand. The Jews were in the Midbar for 40 years, almost 40 years. Why use the word Bamidbar? Why don't you use the name of the place where it happened, which was Midbar Sin between Elim and Sinai? But Midbar is just this generic name for the whole desert. Thank you. You're not really telling me what it is. You did it in the Midbar. They did a lot of things in the desert. Give the specific name. Just like you did Chatzeros, just like you did Paran, just like you did Yamsuf. Give me the specific name. Midbar is everywhere. Give me the name. Midbar Sin. Why the word Bamidbar? Rashi tells us the sin, but why the word Bamidbar? The answer is, Moshe is not just telling them the sin. Moshe is empathizing with the sin. He's not justifying, he's empathizing. Moshe is almost intimating to them, again, together with the sin, he's saying, I know where you were. You were in a desert. You were in the wilderness. A place that the Torah describes, Midbar HaGadol V'Anoir, Nocher, sort of Akav Tzimon Hashem B'Moy, a place filled with snakes and scorpions and dangerous animals and no water. That's a big test to be in. And you have a wife, and you have children, and you have babies, and you have infants. And you say, Mi yitin Moseinu b'Eretz Mitzrayim. Here, we have nothing to eat. At least in Egypt, we were slaves, but we had bread. We had something to eat. Here, we have nothing to eat. They are in a wilderness that stretches miles and miles and miles with little babies screaming and crying. Moshe Rabbeinu says, it's wrong what you did, but I understand. It was a midbar. It was a midbar. And that's what happens in a midbar. Barava. What's Barava? Rashi says, Barava is Arvoi Smoyav. What happened in Arvoi Smoyav? Shchatu bebal pa'or b'shittim. They engaged with the daughters of Midian and Moav and promiscuous relationships, and the women took out the idolatry of Baal Pa'or, and they made the Jews worship the idolatry. 1 second. Arvis Moav was a big place. Torah says Arvis Moav was from Beis HaYeshimis till Avel HaShittim in Parshas Maseh. Why don't you just say B'Shittim? It happened in a place called Shittim. Arvis Moav, the plains of Moav, is very big. Rashi himself says Shittim. Just say B'Shittim. Moshe is empathizing. Ba'arava means in the plains. What are the plains? So Rashi says Ba'arvis Moav, the famous plains of Moav, which were called Arvis Moav. It's like the famous plains, like Ha'arava, in the famous Arava, which is which one? The Moav plains was called the Ha'arava, because Rashi says it was Arvis Moav. Why was Moav called Moav? Why did Moav get the name Moav? You remember? Parshas Vayera, what did Rashi say? Lloyd's daughters got him drunk, and each one had intimacy with him, and each one became pregnant. One of them called her son Ammon. The other one called Moav. What's Moav? He's from my father. So Rashi says there, she was immodest. She publicized in the name that he came from her father, that his grandfather was also his father. The younger sister called him Ammon, which is a more refined name. So Rashi says in Parshas Vayera, she received schar in the days of Moshe. Hashem tells Moshe in Parshas Devarim, by Ammon, don't provoke them. By Moav, don't fight them, but you're allowed to provoke them. 1 second. You're punishing children hundreds of years later because their mother was immodest? Come on. We have a rule in Aseres HaDibros, Poiked Avoin Avos Albonim, we never punish children for their father's sins unless, as Rashi says there, when they continue and perpetuate the sins. Moav's mommy sinned and publicized it. Okay, she thought she was doing the right thing. There's nobody living, and then she publicizes it in the name Moav. So that's why hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later you could provoke the Moavites. From here we understand from these two Rashis that what? That even in the days of Moshe, the people of Moav were completely promiscuous, much worse than Ammon. There was an absolute breakdown of the boundaries of morality. So when Moshe Rabbeinu says Ba'arava, meaning Ba'arvis Moav, he's empathizing with them. There is a limud schus here. He's saying you were in an environment that was filled with toxicity and promiscuity and a breakdown of all moral boundaries. Again, I know you did a sin, but I know how tough the challenge was, my dear children. Moil Suf. What's Moil Suf? Rashi says two things. They rebelled before the splitting of the sea, and they rebelled after the splitting of the sea. You understand the empathy here? You're stuck between a rock and a hard ball. There is absolutely nowhere to run. The Egyptians are behind them. The sea is in front of them. Naturally, there's no way to be saved. Does it not make sense that people lose it? That people rebel? That people become disheartened? That people say, why'd you take us out of Egypt? Let us die there. Was it a lack of faith? Yes. Was it a sin? Yes. They should have known better. They should have done better. But Moshe Rabbeinu says, I understand. I understand human frailty. And I want you to know that you could still make choices. The same is true at the other side. Hashem told them, I want you to collect the booty of Egypt. And there's an abundance of gold. Of course they're going to get stuck there and they don't want to leave. Bein Paran. Bein Paran, what does Rashi say, Bein Paran? Take a look. Masha'asu b'midbar paran al yedei hameraglim. What they did through the meraglim. They did through. He should have said Masha'asu b'chet hameraglim. What they did during the sin of the meraglim, with the sin, what they did through the meraglim. He could have just said b'chet, which also would have been shorter than al yedei. Rashi is again saying something. Masha'asu al yedei hameraglim. You guys would have never done it. The Meraglim had the gift of gab, and they enticed all of you. They dissuaded you. They inculcated fear and dread into your heart. They basically demoralized you. I get it. You were wrong. Your parents were wrong for doing this. This was a bad, bad mistake. They should have known better than these spies. But that's what people of influence can do. They can turn people around, and they can turn them into into people who are not doing the right thing. Al Yedei HaMeraglim, you did it through the Meraglim. Again, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, this is not who you are. You're people of purity. You're people of faith. Ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, Shabbos Sadik Zayin. But the Meraglim did this. Bein Teufel v'Lavan. What's Teufel v'Lavan? What does Rashi say? Toflu al Haman shehu Lavan. They slandered the manna which was white. Why is that so relevant that the manna was white? Why does he use this term? He uses this term to explain why the man had no color. It was bland. It looked bland. The Gemara says in Yuma that people, the famous Gemara Masechta Yuma, where is it? Yuma Daf Ayin Daled, Amid Beis. So the Gemara gives two opinions. One of them is you can't compare somebody who sees the food, somebody who doesn't see the food. The man could convert into every taste, but what did it look like? It looked like something colorless, like the color of water, lavan, that simplicity. So it didn't have that dazzling attraction. You know, with food, it's all about the presentation. When I see what I'm eating and it's colorful and it's geschmack, you can ask the chefs and the restaurants pre-corona. That's what entices the people. That's what gives you part of the geschmack. But the man, the Gemara says, it's like a blind person eating, because what you see is not what you get. What you see is not what you taste. There was this blandness in the man. Again, this is no justification of a sin, but it's the empathy of why the Jewish people could easily complain about the man. What does Rashi say? What should have he said? But machlokes Korach v'Aidasai, in the machlokes of Korach, in the fight of Korach and his people. What's machlokes shel Korach? Ooh, Rashi is saying, I know this machlokes came from Korach. This is machlokes of Korach, not of the Jews. The Jews would have not done this. Korach went around and he incited everybody. That's what Moshe told Hashem. Ha'ish echad yechtav al kolei de tiktzai from Parshas Korach. One man sins, and yet you want to destroy the whole nation? It's only ish echad yechtav, not al kolei de tiktzai. Once again, Moshe is saying, I know that you guys would have never done this on your own. And then the last one, Dizahav. You did it. It was wrong. But the cause of this was not you. The cause of this was a great challenge that Hashem gave you with all this excessive gold. Great story about the Baditchev, Reb Levitzek of Baditchev. You know the story? He once saw a Jew smoking on Shabbos. Comes over to him. He says, you forgot it's Shabbos today? He says, no. He says, you forgot you're not allowed to smoke on Shabbos? He says, no. He says, there's something going on that you found a way that you're allowed to smoke on Shabbos? He says, no. Turns his eyes to heaven. He says, Master of the universe, Father in heaven, I gave this Jew 3 times a chance to get out of it, but he will never, ever say a lie. Why did Baditchev do this? You think he was naive? He wasn't naive. Baditchev was a very savvy person. Because he understood that the deepest rebuke is when you could allow people to see their own goodness and their own potential. This is a way that we don't realize. You want to rebuke me? Show me my potential. It's going to be the greatest rebuke. Because all the rebuke in the world, what is the rebuke going to tell me? You did this, you did this, you did this, you did this. Okay, of course I did this. This is what I do. This is my enjoyment. Show me that I am not this. Show me who I really am. Show me my goodness. Show me the positivity. Show me my power. Show me my potential. That's the greatest rebuke. Then I'm going to look at what I did and I'm going to like, wie kommt es zu mir? I'm not part of this equation. I'm bigger, I'm better, I'm greater, I'm deeper. And I can observe it from a distance and say, this is not the person I want to be. That's the teichicha. And of course, this Parsha is always read the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. Always. Why? The 3 weeks are the time of Teichecha, the 9 days. The time itself rebukes the Jewish people. Like the Gemara says in Tainis, Megalgalin, Sichos liyom zaka, Megalgalin chayva liyom chayva. The time itself, so to speak, rebukes the Jewish people, challenges the Jewish people. The time itself, because of the catastrophic, horrific events that occurred throughout our history as a result of so many mistakes. So when we read Parshas Devarim, the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, it starts off with this message of Eila Dvarim Asher Dibre Moshe, that even when God rebukes the Jewish people and history rebukes the Jewish people, it's with the sensitivity and the awareness of Kvoidom Shel Yisrael. The glory and honor of the Jewish people must always be maintained, because if the Teichecha is not a derivative from Kvoidom Shel Yisrael, you miss the mark. The reason I'm rebuking you is because I see who you are and I want you to see who you are. That's what the Teichecha is about. And you see it in the first words of Megillas Eicha. That terrifying scroll that Yirmiyah HaNavi wrote. Eicha Yosheva Vadod Hoi Rabo Siyoam Hoisa Ki Almana. Alas, how Jerusalem sits in solitariness. The city that was filled with people is now like a widow. The word Eicha, Yoshva Vodot, always challenges us. How she sits bodot, she sits in solitariness. But look at the word that Yirmiyah chose to use, Eicha Yoshva Vodot. In this Teichecha, in this rebuke, he's also saying something very powerful. Reminiscent of the words of Bilam, Heinam levodod yishkod v'goyim lo yischashav. This is a nation that dwells alone and is not counted among the nations. As the Rashbam and other commentators explain in Parshas Balak, that Bilam was glorifying the Jewish people, that after thousands of years of diaspora, expulsions, exile, persecutions, autodofes, pogroms, massacres, Holocaust, all types of savage suffering, turmoil, agony, relocations, to the point that the infrastructure of the Jewish world has gone through such turmoil and agony, you would expect that at this point, at some point, they should assimilate and they should forfeit their identity. Eicha Yoshva Vadad is always also telling you that story of Hein Am Levadad Yishkain, a nation that dwells alone. As the Medrash says beautifully, Yirmiyah compares the Jews to oil. Oil doesn't mix with any other beverage. You pour oil into orange juice, grape juice, water, and the oil always rises to the top. The Jews have been mixed up everywhere, and yet the oil retains its distinction, its badad. Even as he speaks about the solitariness and loneliness of Yerushalayim, he emphasizes in it, there's a different type of loneliness. There's a very, very deep strength among the Jewish people. Because there are two forms of loneliness. There's a loneliness in which I can't trust anybody, nobody trusts me, I hate the world hates me. And then there's a loneliness, you know who you are and you realize that you have a contribution to make that nobody else can make as an individual and as part of a people. Vayivaser Yaakov levadoi bayoimahu. Chayev adam loimar b'shvili nivra ha'olam. There's a loneliness that comes from empowerment, not from insecurity. Yirmiyah HaNavi puts the Geula into Golos. He tells the Jewish people, I know you're alone, but I know that in this aloneness, there's also a different type of aloneness. It's not just a weakness, it's also a strength. There is a strength in you. There's something so special in you. There's something extraordinary about you. Look at your light, look at your gift. And you always remember this. You never allowed your true identity to be lost. This is the kvaydam shal Yisrael that you must always cultivate, cherish, accentuate, find, believe in those kids so that they could believe in themselves. until that moment when the ultimate Kvoidam Shal Yisrael emerges with the binyan, the building of the third Beis HaMikdash. Sheyibana bimheira biyameinu, speedily in our days, ba'agala didan mamar, speedily in our days, even before this Tisha B'Av. Amen v'yamein, amen, ken yehi ratzon.